right. Thanks for tuning in to All Things Division III Soccer with SimpleCoach and Jackie. That there is the beast, Jackie. Want to say hello? And I am SimpleCoach. So on today's SimpleCoach to Coach interview, I had the great opportunity of speaking with Dan Weiler of Johns Hopkins University, the head women's coach there. He's been in his position for 2 years, has some interesting perspectives, how he ended up at Johns Hopkins, some aspects of the game, and I think where he wants to take the program. I hope you enjoy it as much as I had doing it, and without further ado, Dan Weiler, head women's coach at Johns Hopkins University. Peace out. Coach Wheeler, thank you very much for joining me today on this Simple Coach to Coach interview. Really do appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, no problem. Good, happy to be here.
So it's unfortunate that we're connecting this way because actually last Wednesday, I happened to be in Baltimore for business, and I actually went to the Johns Hopkins campus for the first time, and I was going to surprise, hey, I'm here, just to say hello. But I don't know if there was a lacrosse game going on, and then there was a bunch of construction, and I got all flustered because I had a 3:00 meeting. So I was like, yeah, I can say I was here, but I really didn't stop. But
that's all right. No worries.
Definitely next time I'll have to stop by because it looks really, really interesting place to check out. So, maybe we could just start off by if you could just talk about your coaching journey, any coaches along the way that have had an impact on you as a coach and how you see yourself as a coach.
Yeah, I mean, I spent my whole career, as you probably have seen, in Division III. I started right out of college. I was a teacher, so I was a middle school teacher, and that lended pretty easily into coaching because I had played and so on, and that's why I was interested in coaching to a certain degree, but really didn't get into it until my brother was a senior in high school, and I started thinking maybe I want to help out a little bit with high school, and then from there I got, the best word is addicted to it. I mean, I just became so enthralled with the idea of what a team does, getting people to do what you see as a vision, but also getting them to be, a better version of themselves and reach beyond their potential, and all those things that really, that we do, or that we try to do anyway. And so that it really hooked me. And so I started doing a little bit more with high school. I started getting into the girls' side of high school, and then I was lucky because even 2 years into that, I was connected into Concordia College, which is in Moorhead. So I'm originally from Fargo, North Dakota, but Concordia is just the sister city of Fargo, and so got hooked up with at the time Jim Sella, who was the head coach of the men, but then became the head coach of the men and women. And so he was looking for some younger coaches that could help him on both those sides, with the men and the women. So it was myself and another coach that I knew that kind of started that journey, and I, from there, I was doing lots of coaching, club in high school and college and so on, and I really it just became part of my life, and I couldn't see myself teaching the rest of my life. I knew that there were a lot of benefits to it, and I really enjoyed most days, but I also didn't enjoy some days. So whereas on the flip side, I enjoyed every day with coaching. So I knew that was my path, and what was going to look like. And so I was lucky from there that Concordia ended up splitting. It's kind of a weird to put it all in, to think back on this, because you'll see where this is going. They split it into two again. So now there was the men's side, which Jim Sella had, and then I had the women's side, only to be combined again later, where I took over both. So at the time when I was just doing women's, I was part-time, still teaching, still doing a lot, and it was too much. It was too much for my schedule. I was obviously single, so that helped, but
Justifiably so,
yeah,
right?
justifiably. And but when I went to coaching men and women, I was really intrigued by doing this as a profession, but also intrigued by the idea of what are the differences from a gender standpoint, how from a motivation standpoint. I mean, all the things that I'd worked on had been with girls and women up to that point, and so I was pretty intrigued by the other side of it too. I did that about 4 or 5 years, and then they split it again. So it was kind of this accordion of splitting it, bringing it back together, which at the time, 15, 20 years ago wasn't that uncommon. Now it's less common, thankfully. Um, and then I was there for just 2 more years as the women's coach. And we did pretty well. I mean, I think that Concordia side, I have a lot of really fond memories. It's really where I got my identity, at least in the college game. I think Jim Sella was one that brought me into that. He was one that, over the course of my career there, was kind of a constant. He's still at Concordia now as the sports information director, and he still follows the teams that I coach, and so he was really instrumental in what I was doing in the early parts of my career and then beyond. So towards the end there, I got married, and we had traveled a lot, and we knew, being that we were both from that area, we were kind of really curious about other areas of the country. And so we started looking a little bit, and the competitive side of me wanted to find some place that maybe wasn't in the top region and national yet, but had real potential for that. Coming from Concordia as a bit of an unknown, at least in other parts of the country, I knew that might have to be the next step for me. And fortunately got hired at Christopher Newport, basically sight unseen. I mean, they knew my resume and those kind of things, but that was pretty much the extent of it. Went there and really loved all the things that they were trying to do and were doing. Different teams were in different places that way, but really saw a great amount of potential and I would say a little advanced model from a competitive standpoint than I was at. So changed into full-time head coach, full-time assistant coach, and a part-time, which of course is a great model. That really intrigued me. That's where Jamie Gunderson, I know you spoke to him a bit. That's where he came on board, and we were there together for that whole period of time, and built it to doing really good. I mean, I feel like we started in a place that had a team with potential to a team that was competing at the highest level, and of course, now them winning it shows that was a process that we went through. And towards and then now 2 years ago, this job opened, and it was really intriguing to me. And now I'm here, and so we've been here for a couple years, and this place is incredible and really had a lot of things to offer for me and my family. So along those same lines, like from a personal level, moving to a new city and experiencing, another part of the East Coast. And I think my time at CNU, Coach Steve Shaw, who was a long, big legacy coach, retired, I think now, gosh, I get my years mixed up, 3-4 years ago, but was really instrumental to me in the hiring process at Christopher Newport, because he was on the search committee, but also I really connected with him. My wife connected with him and his wife, and he's a really old school guy, but a pretty amazingly accomplished coach, but also kind of a sage when it comes to his outlook on life, just kind of generally. And that really resonated with me, that international things that he does and so on. And so he was really influential in my time at CNU. I think more recently, Craig Appleby's is the men coach. He has an office right across. I know that you spoke to Craig as well, and him and I have become close friends pretty quickly. I think COVID probably accelerated that a little bit. Trying to battle through all these crazy things that have happened the last couple of years, but either way, I mean, he's got a great soccer mind, and we've been really, I think, collaborating a lot across programs, which I really appreciate about this school. I think that's was important to me to find a place like that. So just with men's soccer, that's an easy fit because we're the same sport, but even across other head coaches here and other programs here, the collaboration is higher than I've ever been at in other places. So that's been really awesome for me. So that brings me to today, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, what was it about? That's a pretty bold move, right? You get Christopher Newport to a pretty high level definitely over the last 4 or 5 years, and then Johns Hopkins comes knocking on the door. I mean, was there any reluctance to it, or was it sort of like this sense of adventure? Hey, and not to mention Johns Hopkins is Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, I mean, a bit of both. I mean, I think I really loved my time at CNU. I think it really, I really grew a lot. I learned quite a bit as a coach of what that next level kind of looks like, and what you need to do and what I need to do and mistakes that I made to get a team to kind of stay at that top level, because it is a tricky balancing act. And I loved the people there, and it was tough. It was a tough decision. It was, I think, not unlike leaving Concordia. Those are, for me, I'm very invested in my team and the people I work with, and anytime I have to say goodbye, it's not easy. That said, when I started talking with Hopkins, from the outset, I was really impressed because we had played them, as you probably know.
Yeah.
We played them. Coincidentally, my last game as a CNU coach was against Hopkins, but and so I knew the quality, I knew the tradition, and I also felt like there were things that could grow. And so as I got on campus and started talking to the staff and started learning their model, which really, as I'm sure you know, our lacrosse teams are Division I.
Yeah.
So we really benefit, I think, on a level that's slightly different than most Division III schools of that competitive model, and the vision of some of the things that we've incorporated since then. So, I mean, just the size of our administration staff means that we get, a lot of support. The addition of a mental health specialist, the addition of on staff, the addition of a dietitian on staff, and among other things, and I think those are pretty rare in our D3 world. And
yeah, very.
And I think it's for me, it that kind of, I'm a very collaborative guy, so that kind of access to that was really intriguing to me. Certainly, the competitive part of me was questioning, okay, what do I want to do? What do I want to do next? And do I feel like this team can do as much or more? And I feel like we can. And we're working toward that, undoubtedly. I mean, it takes a little time in this transition time. But I feel really good about our next class, and I feel really good about what next year is and even beyond. But really, the thing that sealed the deal for me, honestly, was when I sat in the room with the players, and they had really great questions for me, and it was clear how invested they were with what they wanted from the next person in there. The previous coaching staff had been here for 20 some years, and the only head coach in Hopkins history. So I knew that coming into it, I was never under the kind of focus of I want to come in and change everything, because first of all, that's not really how I operate, but also given the scenario that we're dealing with, that just wasn't a smart move. And in talking to the players in the very first go around, it became really clear to me that they were really excited about their future, and they're really excited in a very specific way. What are types of things that they wanted, and that really resonated with me. And on top of that, they're brilliant people, really great friendly people to begin with. And so So it was at all of it. And then on a personal note, like I said, just maybe, from my family, I have two young kids. They hadn't been in school yet. So moving then would be helpful because they weren't in school. So if we were going to move, that would probably be the time to do it. We've loved Baltimore. We love the schools here. And so my family's been, I think, really blessed with both moves, but particularly, the ability to work for such a great school and be in such a great city too.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Baltimore. You get hired, you come in, and I seem to think it was the day after, at least here in New Jersey, that everything was locked down. And then you went into that COVID, whatever, that we experienced for a year. How challenging was that for your team? How challenging was it for you? You're the new guy. You're trying to do what you want to do with the program, and you're talking to everybody via Zoom.
Yeah, it was terrible. I mean, your timeline's right. So I was hired March 1. I got on campus officially, physically March 1. And that weekend, we hosted the national tournament for men's basketball. And we were the first school, to my knowledge, that did not allow spectators because this was right before everything shut down. And of course, everyone thought we were crazy. Like, what's happening? Why are you being so aggressive with this, and so on? And then 4 days later, campus closed. And then among other campuses across the entire country. So I started March 1 and campus closed March 12. So over the course of those, 12 days or whatever, I met with the team once. I met with the captains twice. I met with maybe 5 or 6 players individually, which is common for me to just get to know them and so on. And then that was it. And then we were virtual for a year. Yeah. And it's so difficult to begin with, honestly. Like, the transition to get to know these people, it's hard because they all know each other, which is great. And so I'm doing two things at the same time. I'm trying to gauge where is the team within what I believe in terms of cohesion, in terms of those things, but also who are they, and what makes them tick, and what do they love, and what do they dream about, and that all is best done when you're sitting right in front of somebody. And so we did as much as we could to move the needle of what this program would become and where we are now. But I mean, a Zoom call or even any virtual thing like this, it feels personal and feels better, right? Because it's just you and I. Yeah. But you add any more than 4 people and it's over. It's over. Yeah. And on top of that, so we would have, of course, we did what we could. We had small group meetings. We had large group meetings. We met once, twice a week. We did a lot. But the ability to actually have authentic connection is just gone. It's just not going to happen. Yeah. So that's on the team side. And of course we couldn't do anything soccer wise. So there's nothing there. And then for us anyway, we were virtual all the next fall, which isn't the case for every school. And then when we did come back last spring, it was very distanced, it was very safe and so on, which was great. It made me feel actually more comfortable, but at the same time, in terms of straight up, here's how we're going to play, here's what we're going to do, we didn't get into any of it really until late in the spring, and even then it was a little bit segmented. So building and forming an identity was as good as it could be, but really lacking a lot. And I really feel like we're still doing it now. I mean, although in retrospect of taking over other programs, I think it does take years regardless, but we certainly were delayed at least a full year of that. Now, simultaneously, we're recruiting. And recruiting for me, at CNU was very regional, if not very state, which is not the case here at all. Which was really, by the way, really intriguing to me to begin with, is finding a bigger pool of players, at least from the aspect of all 50 states and so on. And so we had to do things that I would never have done before, which is recruit sometimes almost exclusively through film. And it's not the best. It's certainly not what you want to do, but with everything being shut down, it was just the way you had to do it. We were fortunate to pop in a camp right before Baltimore shut down. So in September, it was off campus, and we were able to do a little bit. It wasn't really under Hopkins' name at all, but it was under my name. So it was, and we just had people show up, and fortunately they did, and had good players there. But beyond that, we were doing the best we could. And the 21 class, we feel like is good. They're great people. They had a really good season, all of them. So we feel great about where we started, particularly given the circumstances of what we were dealt. I don't want to do it again. And nobody does. But yeah, it was really hard. But I mean, I really believe that you have to, especially maybe any profession, but especially ours. I mean, there's things that you do year after year that are pretty sick. We have a pretty cyclical job. I mean, we have the season is pretty obvious, like fall into winter and the spring and so on. Our recruiting cycles, all of those things are pretty cyclical, but there's things that come up. I mean, we deal with people, we deal with incoming people, and that's unpredictable. And so I think whenever things go wrong, I mean, how do you react and how do you want your team to react is really important. And if I'm flying off the handle, or if I can't handle those things myself, then that just sends the wrong message, but also can put us into a tailspin a little bit quicker. So we try to be really stable during that time and reach out. And it's actually taught us some things, some of the virtual events that we're able to do still. And, given how far away we are from at least some places, it's actually given us more access to people, and made us rethink a little bit of our recruiting. And now we actually head to places now, whereas before we would have them, always come to us. So we actually do satellite camps now, which really was a kind of a reflection of need of COVID, because particularly in California, their testing was delayed and canceled for a long, long time, longer than most parts of the country. So we knew that getting out there would be pretty important. And so we're going to keep doing that. That's been successful last year, so we're going to do that again. But yeah, I think it's all in how you approach it. But like I said, let's put it behind us.
Let's chalk that up as an interesting experience and never revisit it, right?
Yeah.
I was going to say your comment about you feeling good about your 2021 class. Well, you ended up with a gold mine in Katie Sullivan, right? Who's a true freshman. Scored 13 goals, 10 goals. I can't remember, 5 assists or something.
Yeah, 10 and 8, I think, is what she ended with.
Yeah. She's pretty remarkable. But all right, so let's start shifting over into the season. What, and I guess this sort of ties back to what I asked earlier, just about you coming into the new program and sort of the challenges you dealt with as you're going through with COVID. How much have you been able to bring to your team that's, I don't want to say new, maybe it's new to them, but that sort of more aligns to the way you want your program to be versus what it was before?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of alluded to it a little bit before. The matchup against Hopkins was always difficult for us previously. And I think across the board, anyone that played them, it was difficult. this school is a fantastic school, so it undoubtedly is going to attract a lot of attention. And fortunately for us, we really compete. Well, first of all, against similar schools, but even Ivy League schools, and so if particularly if they're in interest in certain majors, I think we can really draw them to us and have them forego some of those other opportunities. And and so the quality I know is has been there. I would say the difference in what my approach is a little just straight up soccer wise, just less direct than what it was. I think the teams were really talented for years, to have done really well for decades, really. I feel like there is a level that we may be able to reach, that, and right or wrong, this is the way that I like to play, but that includes more possession of the ball, that includes a lot of pressing, especially high up the field, which I think was present previously with Hopkins, and 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 also includes a little bit more thoughtfulness in how to actually break teams down instead of using just strength and power. And over the course of the last two recruiting cycles, that's part of what we do, right? Is we try to find players that not only can are good fits for the school, number one, but have the capacity to play the kind of style that we see us producing. And we have metrics that we're using that are showing the kind of objectively what that means and what the next year kind of looks like. And and I'm really excited about the players coming in, and I'm excited about our returners too, because they've really bought into this, and we've explained it to them, and we've explained, number one, why we're doing it. It's not just because I like to play that way, but I think it produces a bit more. And and also just the idea of that it's a process and it's a development and it takes time. So I think we started that process, of course, this year. And if you watch really specific moments of our season, you'll see moments when we were really clearly following through with that philosophy, and moments when we were kind of leaning back toward the way that it used to be, or the way that it was a little bit more ingrained. And so as time goes on, that starts to shift a little bit more. And I think that's the exciting thing for me. So as I took over the job, I went and watched every game multiple times of the past year of Hopkins. So this is now 2.5 years ago. And I just make notes of, things that I looked at, and then I brought that to the team. We did that film over Zoom, so I don't know how much of an impact it made, but basically breaking down those moments so that we can say, okay, here's when we do it right, and here's when we're struggling a little bit. And at the end of it, there was a little bit more. There was more moments of struggle, and I said to the team, I said, listen, all I see is opportunity. That's all I see, and all I see is room for us to grow and room for us to become better. And that's what they saw too, thankfully. And we've really followed that mantra. And it is one of our core principles too, is the growth. And so the idea of, let's find out where we're deficient and then just move from there, whatever it might be. But yeah, it does take time though. And I think the short answer is we're becoming less direct. But I think the long play of this is to maintain a really powerful attacking pressing team, which they have been in the past. We're just tweaking a little bit of the way that I see that involving maybe more positions and more players that way, and building maybe deeper.
It's interesting that you say that that you could you see moments where you're carrying through on your philosophy, and there's other moments where you're reverting back. Because I watched the TCNJ game just yesterday as I was trying to sort of get a better understanding of how you all play. And I noticed that there were moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, look at that pass. Instead of, most teams would launch it forward, and then it was a battle. I mean, there was just a complete battle.
Yeah.
And then there would be moments where you're like, what are you doing that for? You're launching a ball. Like it just sort of, and then it would go back to the possession base. Like it was interesting to watch, but I'll mention that. I'll talk about that.
Yeah. Interesting is a good word to choose. I would say frustrating in moments, but yeah, not just for me. I mean, for them. I mean, and that's the thing. That's the thing about this is we laid the plan and they're trying to do the plan. Like they're not just saying, well, no, we're going to play a different way today. That's not the case. I mean, I think when players get on the field, in our case this last year, they were doing everything they could. It just, when pressure is the highest, you tend to fall into the closest available habit. And for them, sometimes that was that one. And so that just takes time. And so you're right. I mean, I think that you witness that is very indicative to the way our year went. So against a top team like TCNJ or some of the other ones we played, there were moments where we were so good and just really picked teams apart, and there was moments when we weren't. And so I think that the indication of how our season went, just from a result standpoint, is pretty fair. Like that we tied those games, that we were in those games, and that within the conference we had some really tough games and a lot of one-goal games. So we hope to rectify that, but we have a tough conference and we schedule tough outside of that. So yeah, it's valid. We're working on it.
Well, it's interesting for me because I that's the sort of thing where I love the game, right? Is you see these changes in teams throughout a game and how do they adopt and how do you adopt versus another team. And it's interesting because I have, other than my hat, I have no association with Hopkins. But if I was in your shoes, I think I'd be pulling my hair out. Like here you had a moment where it was going so well, and then what's going on? But so knowing that here you are, it's your first full season. 2020 is a wash, right? Like I don't think have spoken with anyone who said that 2020 the spring was just awesome, other than the fact that you got to play, and if you got to play some games. So what was sort of your expectation going into 2021?
I was really excited. I mean, like you said, I mean, 2020 was what it was, but at least I was able to train the team and we played a couple games and I could see a little bit of what we had. I mean, I was fortunate in that I knew a fair number of the players, not since I coached them, because I coached them rather, but because we played against them. So I knew a bit of their tendencies, I knew a bit of their quality, but then there was quite a few players that I hadn't seen because they weren't in our game or I hadn't seen them as much. But then we had a whole class of incoming players that I knew nothing about. So, and so just getting a feel for, okay, where are we right now was really instrumental. And of course we're looking at the 21s coming in and seeing what kind of impact they make. Some of them we knew would. We felt Katie would. She did great. We felt others would. But we weren't sure. We didn't. There was not a full evaluation on all those kids, and some of them we saw live. Most of them we saw live, but two of them we didn't, and which is completely goes against my recruiting philosophy. But it was just the way it had to be. One of them was international, so that changes the dynamic a little bit. But so we knew that class would be good, but what kind of an impact, we're not sure. Meanwhile, we were working on the grad transfers and starting to kind of see what possibilities there would even be with that. Certainly with COVID being terrible. It also presented opportunity for players that were planning to go to grad school anyway, and now they have this year. And so we were talking to some of them, and good players. And so over the course of the spring, we were getting to know the team. We knew the freshmen, and they were getting to know some of these grad kids that might be coming, and then eventually did come. And so we were very excited. I mean, we had kind of a collection of very experienced players, grad, but also returning players that may not have any much experience, and then these brand new players. So I mean, it wasn't until we hit preseason that we really know what we had, and then from there we started figuring it out. And I felt from the the first day that the quality was good enough for us to be able to compete with any team, which I think we did. But how much of a run could we make? How much depth do we have, and so on? How much are injuries going to play into it? In our case, one of our grad kids tore her knee again very first practice. She ended up playing strangely without an ACL the whole year. Riley O'Toole, which most people don't even know that happened, because they you wouldn't know that she was that injured. But at any rate, and that happened to several other returners, some other seniors. Like, we had a litany of injuries that really affected a fair amount of our depth. And so we just kept plowing through and kept sticking to our principles, and kept working on our team cohesion, and working on not just what we were doing that year, but there was a really big emphasis, and not just from me, but from the players, that this is the beginning of something that we want to build.
Yeah.
And that was very obvious, especially to the senior class. We're here. There were 12 seniors, so we had 15 players that will leave us, so 12 seniors and 3 grad students. So it was a very big and influential and impactful group. And fortunately for us as coaches, they led in the right way, and they were humble, they were respectful but competitive, and that really catapulted us. And then we tried to win as much as we could. And at the end of the day, our game is tricky, and some of those games went our way. I think more of them went our way than they didn't. But we got snake bitten in the semi against an FNM team that I thought was great all year. They got better as the year went on. He's doing a great job there, and they, had a good scheme against us, and they scored, and we didn't. And so that's what it amounts to sometimes, and
it's a game of goals, right?
But I think all that stuff makes us better, and I felt like the run in the tournament, I feel like the game against Wesleyan could have gone either way. So we could have kept playing, which is encouraging. But we just weren't quite there yet. And so, no, I felt excited, and as the preseason went on, I felt excited again. And as time unfolded, although there was those moments of growth that were frustrating for all of us, there's always those moments, to me, are always opportunity, and now that's what we'll start to work on in a couple weeks when we hit our spring season.
Did you in this during the season, did you ever have one of those moments where you're like, the team is coming together to a point where this might be a special year for you? Or, again, knowing that you have the ebbs and flows, right, of, hey, we're doing really, really well, and then you trip up in one game. Yeah,
a bit of both. I mean, I think witnessing how games went for us, it depended on how it was going to go. I mean, that sounds silly, but when we were on kind of this roller coaster of finding our highest level, some games we would find that level quite a bit of the game, and some of the games we wouldn't. We never dipped down to really playing, I would say, poorly and just not engaged at all. We never did that, which was really encouraging. But we would kind of dip in between playing pretty well to playing really just a bit more dominant. So it's not the best recipe to make a run in the tournament. You have to have a little bit more stability in your level, and you have to have as the tournament goes on, undoubtedly you play very strong teams over and over again. And so if you have those dips, good teams are going to take advantage of those dips. And I think, if you look just referencing the TCNJ game, that's kind of how that game went on both sides, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
There were moments where they were sharp and really pinned us, and by their own accord, and some because of maybe a little bit of our reaction to what was happening, and they scored in some of those moments, and then we did the opposite. We really bounced back and we scored. So it was a really a big battle game, but our level never dropped below our whatever you want to call like mid-high.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas sometimes it dropped a little bit more into our mid-range, and we, like I said, never struggled with games necessarily, but didn't have that kind of consistency that you really need to win and win and win and win, because it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah,
that's why only one team can do it one year.
That's the consistency part. That TCNJ game, I kept it, and again, I'm not taking away from what TCNJ was doing and how your team was reacting to what TCNJ was doing, but I always felt you were close, and I was like, keep going with the body blows, because a goal will come, and then all of a sudden the game would shift, and then suddenly you're back not on your heels, but you were back defending a little bit more, trying to be a little bit more direct, trying to surprise TCNJ, where I was just like, keep going, doing what you're doing,
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think, we're in a sport of chances. And if you don't create more and more chances, then you're just limiting yourself to getting the percentage of your chance to be so good, and that's not a good recipe. And that's kind of where we were this year. And I feel like our offense is just starting to fire. I mean, I think over time we'll start to become a bit more dynamic and start to create more chances. But it's also the hardest thing to do in our game, right? I mean, it's the reason the scores are the way they are and so on. But so I think over time we hope that just the raw number of chances will go up, and like you said, that those chances come from dealing with those moments of momentum and dealing with those moments of a team trying to get back into the game, and what you do in response to it. Do you panic a little bit, or do you actually take the steam out of the game by moving the ball a little bit more?
Yeah.
And we tended to do a little bit of both, depending on which game it was or what moment it was.
Well, that's the hard part, right? Is just as a player, and I think back to my days, is just have that awareness enough as to how the game is going for you, and deal with the ebbs and flows, right? So if it's going super well for you, how do you take advantage, and doing the things necessary to take advantage? But when they're not going so well, how do you respond and be thoughtful about, how do I break this cycle so then I could get back on the attack?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let me just, you had two All-Americans on the team, on both ends of the field, right? Bonnie Shea, who is a graduate student, who I think is one of your center backs. And then Katie Sullivan, who I referenced, the freshman up top, who led the team in goals and assists. And I just sort of like that contrast. You have somebody all the way in the back and you have somebody all the way up top. Like, how important were they to you? And I'm assuming Shay is done, right? She's graduating or moving to whatever afterwards. But what are your expectations for Katie going into the next year? Because look at your level, right? You're at that level, a freshman to perform that way is an anomaly, not common, right?
Right.
So.
Well, let me talk about Bonnie quickly, and then I'll come back. I'll circle back to Katie. But so the backstory of Bonnie, she's from Dartmouth, played there, was a captain there, all region, and so on. So we knew competitively, that she would be really impactful, or we thought she would, and she of course was. But the big thing with us, with our grad students, is I do spend a lot of time talking to them, because the dynamic of them joining any team, and then possibly playing over people is one that can be really challenging for a certain person, but also can be really easy for others. It was very easy for Bonnie, mostly because she's a very high character person, and she understood what she was getting into, that she could be taking time from someone, and that she got it. She got that it would take her patience to be able to wait a little, to put a little more stamp on the back line and so on, and to up her leadership would be put on pause, at least initially, because there was a feeling out period with them as teammates getting used to each other and so on. And she's one that handled that amazing. I mean, I think the team generally handled it amazing, and really were open and welcome to all of our grad transfers, and all that, of course, helped. But she was one that, as it turned out to be, really instrumental in what we were doing. So the backstory beyond that within the team was, the two previous starters were Laurel Buck and Nat Farrell, and Nat got hurt, and was getting surgery right before the season started, which we weren't expecting. So Nat wasn't at least probably going to be 100%, if not playing in preseason. So that leaves Laurel as the only other starter, and Laurel was leaving to go study internationally. And so we might not have had any center backs that at least had significant starting experience and so on. And as it turned out, Laurel, the timing of when Laurel needed to be where she needed to be internationally worked out that she played part of the season. So Laurel, as you probably saw, played, I think 4 or 5 games for us. So initially, it was Laurel with great amount of experience and Bonnie with great amount of experience, although at Dartmouth. And so really experienced, 2 very experienced center backs. And they worked really well together, and things were going really well. But we knew Laurel was leaving, and Nat still was coming back and working on rehab and so on. But taking longer than she wanted for sure. And we were just being patient with that. So anyway, we had the spot was open. So what are we going to do? And we threw El Marine in there, which is one of our other freshmen, and comes from a great club and really competitive, and the partnership that they formed, so that's Bonnie and now El, had to be almost immediate because we played big teams right away after Laurel left, and their partnership was awesome right away. I mean, it grew over time, and I think that was the moment that Bonnie could kind of take a step forward and say, okay, now I gotta lead. Now it's time, because now there's a freshman here that is going to do the best she can, but she needs my help. And so it was kind of a catalyst for us to move into, okay, this is what the back line is going to look like. And fortunately for us, Bonnie was the type of person she was and the type of player she was. And it worked, better and better over time. The only real question mark with Bonnie was her body going to be able to handle the pounding of 90-minute games after 90-minute games that she was taking, and it did take its toll later in the season. But she's a warrior, and no one outside of our intimate group would ever know it, but she was hurting towards those last games and just powered through it. At any rate, so Bonnie was really instrumental to us, so well deserved for sure that All-American award. So Katie's a bit of a rarity in our division, I will say.
Yeah.
Not just from a point standpoint, but and I know our division quite well. I've been, of course, around, but I also know teams from all over the place. And I think I haven't seen a player like her that frequently. She's very, very good on the dribble, can go either way, can shoot with either foot, is obviously more dominantly left, but can shoot with either foot, and is pacey, can head when she needs to, not amazing, but good. Like, she's a very good soccer player that's athletic enough. And so from a straight up, how do you mark this kid? She's a bit of a problem. And that's where, as a freshman, we gave her freedom to express that and just go. The next level for her is a little bit more subtlety and a little bit more. Um, she's going to attract more attention now.
Yeah.
I mean, because now they know her. So as she attracts more attention, the ball should go somewhere else,
Yeah.
and then wait till it gets back to her, and so on. So some of that stuff will come. It's all of these things for her were very well deserved. I felt like she was one of the most potent and dynamic attackers in the country. That said, it's a big award to get as a freshman, and so how she handles that.
The bar is high now, right?
The bar's high, and I mean, and I had a conversation with her. She's like, "What if what's next year going to look like? What's the spring going to look like?" And I said, "Well, you'll do the best you can. We'll work on things that you need to work on, and you'll play soccer." I said, the bottom line is, would you want this any other way? I mean, this is the challenge in front of you, but would you want this any other way? And she's like, no. And I've said, done. So let's move on and figure out what might be holding you back, and not let fear be an additional one, right? And so, and she's a total nut in terms of soccer. Like, she's a soccer hound. She will go out and kick by herself every day. We literally in preseason had to pull her off the field. I'm like, you have to stop shooting. You're going to pull a muscle. That's the kind of kid this is, among others within her class, is they love to play. Yeah. And so I mean, if all these awards come back to her, great, but I'm more concerned about just keeping her love of the game up there. And if we can do that, she's going to be a handful for anybody. So that accolades aside, that's more important to me, that she just enjoys what she's going through.
She had, I noticed her in that TCNJ game. She received the ball and has the ability to turn and go in like a 3-step period, and the defender doesn't even react. And that to me is, looked at that and I thought, oh my gosh.
It's rare. It is. She can receive it at multiple heights. She can get, and she can go, and she can go both ways. She can escape both ways. She's crafty. There's no doubt.
And then, because I'm a former, or I still am a goalkeeper waiting for the national team call up, but I think they might have lost my number. Yeah, that's a good answer. That might be the problem. Yeah. Caitlyn Hendricks, your goalkeeper, who I thought was another outstanding ball player, recognized which I think is spectacular. At his place like Johns Hopkins, an academic All-American, and then the sports information director's All-American, first team All-American. She only allows 10 goals, which is, I mean, that's astounding. Like, I mean, maybe you could speak a little bit about her, but also, what are your thoughts moving ahead to try to replace her, right? Because again, I'm thinking just from a back line perspective, you're losing her to grad school or graduation, and then Bonnie Shea was a stalwart for you in the middle of the field. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the challenge you have every year someone graduates. I mean, we certainly want them to stick around, but also want them to get out of here. So Caitlyn is a very special person to me, a very special person to this team. She was one of our captains. She's got a very larger than life personality, and really recommitted herself from last year to this year to get ready for the season. I think our goalkeeping situation was pretty unique. It will be unique to Hopkins forever now. Also probably pretty unique to any program. But so we had 3 senior goalies this year, and then 2 additional goalies to that, a sophomore and a freshman. So 5 total. And so having 3 in the same class is a bit of an issue. First of all, from a competitive standpoint, you're going to pick one, so you're not picking 2, and that's just within their class. So that can go wrong. It didn't, thankfully, because Chantal and Hannah, the other two seniors, are very good friends with Caitlyn, and they really bonded with one another, and so it went right in terms of them sticking together and so on. But you don't want to roll those dice every year, right? I mean, that's a tough thing. Um, but Caitlyn rose above the five and came back this season more fit than she was. Did more, I would say, more training than she had probably done the last summer, and was really prepped to do well. She's a she's a very uniquely good fit for the way that we played. So she's very good with her feet. So with what we want to do in the future, but which we started to do, which we mentioned earlier, is build more and actually keep the ball more. Well, if you have a goalie that can do it too, you have a total
advantage. Yep.
Huge advantage, especially in my opinion in the women's game. And so we really use that as much as we could. I mean, she would play really high up her line. She would really, and it was in many ways as a link, and instead of a disruptor for transition, she was a link to get out and a link to kind of possess and so on. And we use that certainly more than they had in the past, but also um, showed a glimpse on the way in which we want that kind of position to operate. And the other part is she's overall a really good shot stopper, but she's specifically good at high shots.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the women's game, and especially with the teams that the way in which we were giving up chances were typically chances from far and high. And so the number of goals we gave up, or even the number of chances within the 18, was definitely lower, which is of course what you want. But if you're giving away high range, long range, high angled shots, and your goalie's not good at those, you're going to give up more, which she happens to be very solid in that particular area. So with the way that it all played out, it played into, well, we're not going to get scored on very much. And the 10 goals was good. I feel like we can be even a little sharper than that. It's certainly a good stat, and I think I could be wrong, but it's top two, if not top, that have been allowed in Hopkins history. So we're on the right track for sure. And she's the type of person that can handle all of the stuff that we had to go through to 5 goalies. How does she deal with this? Stay competitive, but stay humble, and bring these 5 together as best she could, along with her teammates doing the same thing. And so we couldn't have asked for more. We couldn't ask for more from our goalies. And so now the challenge, and this is why you don't do this, is we go from 5 to 2 within months. So now we have 2. We do not currently have a 22 coming in. We're looking at possibly some grad students, but we don't know how that's going to play out. The 2 other goalies are good. They're very good goalies. Div is the sophomore and Allison's the freshman, both very good goalies. And, their time is now. That's what spring is all about. Let's open up and let's see what you've done. And we start to see what that looks like, and then give them some feedback about what fall might look like and so on. But, inevitably, every season to us is unique. Every season, not just because of graduation, because of other things too. People might leave the team and so on, although that happens less frequently here. But you have this, ingredients, so to speak, for lack of a better metaphor, and then you build the cake that you're going to build, and we'll see what it looks like completely. We know a lot of what it looks like. We just don't know from a possible grad student angle, or what that's going to all play out like. But, either way, we'll go through it together.
Mm-hmm. Do you have, there's always that in the back of the mind about going into the new year or into the next season. Do you have any sort of concerns about where you're at and getting, as you're sort of building up to being ready for the 2022 season?
No. I mean, if I reflect a little bit on Christopher Newport, it took quite a while. It took quite a while for us to really get to that I would call elite level, and I think we're there already. We have work to do, and there's no doubt going to be obstacles. There's no doubt going to be a lot of things we have to do and improve, and we have to be better as coaches than we were this year, and take all that stuff and take responsibility from the coaching staff to the player. Like, all that stuff's going to happen, but we are really excited about next year. I think the team will be very good. How much we win and how much all those things play out, time will tell. But I feel like we established such a great starting point, from style to cohesion to all the things that are so important, that and I just love this team, and I love these players because they're very brilliant people. They're also very driven people. They're also have very high emotional intelligence. So moving the needle here seems to be going a little bit faster, which I'm really excited about that. And some of that has nothing to do with me, of course. It's that we just are lucky to be able to be around, these kind of people. And so, no, I don't have any real concerns. I hope they stay healthy, and I'm knocking on wood right now, because it's
Yeah.
In our game and the women's game, it's really difficult to do. Knees alone is always a tricky one. But that's something you can't worry about. I mean, it's going to happen, and hopefully it doesn't happen as much, and hopefully maybe not at all this next year. But besides those little things that are common, I think the program's ready to move into a new level, we hope.
Yeah, that's the injuries, right? And that's the worst. To me, it's like you just give the opportunity to play and let the chips fall where they may playing. But if injury becomes a part of that, that's the biggest bummer, right? Because you never get to test or prove yourself in the course of competition. Let's shift over into recruiting, because obviously Johns Hopkins is Johns Hopkins, right? You're in a very unique position as the school. I mean, the demands academically and whatnot, but just from a soccer perspective, I think you were ranked as high as number 2 in the country, and I think you ended up 8th, depending on which poll you look at. How important is that type of ranking for you from a recruiting perspective at Hopkins, or is it less so because Hopkins is such a magnet for top academic talent?
Right. Well, it helps. I mean, there's no question that, being ranked higher when someone's looking at a school and that wants to be in a competitive program, I mean, it certainly helps. It's not why they come to Hopkins. I mean, it's certainly they're looking for high academic institutions just generally, and so there are usually we have a list of common schools that they're looking at, and so we know that the real draw is the academics, and it should be, because this is a world-class institution. It's a hard school, so they have to know and be prepared for what they're getting in for. And then I think the next level of our recruiting has to do with the family of players that they get connected to. And through our recruiting, we fortunately this last cycle been able to do a fair number of on-campus camps, and that's when they get to know our players and get connected there. So I think those two things supersede like a ranking and all, because they know we're competitive, but certainly the connection to academics, the connection to the institution that way, and then just the connection to their teammates, potentially future teammates, those are always hold more weight than that. I mean, we have other bells and whistles, and there's a lot of things that we do with our tech and with other things that are really intriguing to players and families, that I think are just one more thing. I think the ranking becomes one more thing. Us, not being shy about that we're after national championships. They like to hear that. The fact that this school garners multiple national championships every year from other sports is helpful, and rare. That we are in pole position of the Directors Cup right now, which means that all of our sports are very competitive, is really appealing. But I think those first two are certainly the ones that are the big hook.
Yeah. Do you, and this might change now because you're at Hopkins, but do you recruit players or do you recruit positions? So are you looking just for, hey, I just need good soccer players, or are you looking, I need a right back or a holding mid?
Yeah, I mean, both really, but I think our mindset has been that you have an opening. What are you going to do with that opening? Who's going to fill that? Like all the normal things from a recruiting standpoint. The difference with us is that we kind of, from the best analogy, so to speak, or metaphor, whichever it is, that I can give you is that recruiting for us is threading a needle, and then we have to thread a second needle because they have to get accepted. So we're looking for a very elite club player, and then we have to thread the needle of can they actually get in.
Yeah.
So for us, what happens is happen at least the last two cycles. It remains to be seen if this will happen again, but it has happened at least these last two cycles, now three, I guess a little bit with the 23s, is that we do attract a very particular type of player. They're usually more central players. They're usually pretty technical players. They're usually, of course, smart players. And there are certain positions that we don't see as many in terms of volume within our list. And so part of our job is not to think about recruiting as, okay, we have to have this player in left back. She's been playing there all the time. Like, we've got to look at only these kids playing left back because that's what we need. We think of it now as who can play in that position, but I don't care where she's playing now. I did a bit of that at my old job, but not nearly as much as I'm doing now. And that's a little more challenging, honestly, because you don't get to see them in that position because they're playing back for club every time you see them. So them coming to camp and us moving them to a new spot is helpful. Just as an example, one of our incoming freshmen played right back for her club, played right back for, basically for a while. And I went to a camp and I said, "Do you play? Are you a midfielder?" She's like, "What? Maybe I did a little, like here and there." And I said, "I think you're a midfielder." And so she came to camp and we stuck her in the midfield. And she's both.
Yeah.
Kid. But we were looking at her more in the midfield because of the way our list was kind of playing out. It turns out, strangely, in this case, that we're actually moving her back probably to be considered as a back. But my point is that we've got to be really thorough about our evaluation. I mean, I think you always have to be, but especially if you're thinking about a player that is playing out of the position that they normally are, you just don't want to get it wrong. You don't want to say, well, let's try her and let's see how it goes.
And it's a nightmare.
Yeah. And I think my challenge here and our challenge, broadly at this school is that we have a retention rate of 98% and a graduation rate of 99%. So when they come, they don't leave.
Yeah.
Which is a really good problem to have.
Yeah.
Because you know that they're going to be invested, but it also creates a little bit of pressure on the front end. Because you hope to get it right because those are the players that you're going to have.
Yeah.
And so therefore the number of spots that you have luxury of offering is smaller. And then you're still threading two needles. So I think, which was was not the case at some of my previous jobs, where you can bring in bigger classes and you're not concerned about the size and number of your team because you know that there's going to be, some attrition there and so on. Where that doesn't happen here. So all that said, all of those things go into kind of our decision making of, is this person going to fit with all of what we need? And then the big evaluation too is, are they the right kind of person?
Yeah.
Are they going to fit into what we believe in? And that's a really big part. So that can separate kids at some point too. So I think, yeah, I mean, we look at both. We want to fill those spots, but it's a little bit more nuanced here than what I've experienced at previous jobs.
All right. So the last question for you: what's the best way for someone to get your attention?
Yeah, I mean, email us. I mean, call us. Get in touch with us. Come to a camp. I mean, normal stuff. I mean, normal recruiting things. I mean, we get. The abnormal thing is we'll get anywhere from 5 to 25 emails a day.
Wow.
Sometimes closer to before events, we'll get anywhere from 20 to 40 emails a day. So we had our banquet this last week. And so when we have events like that, obviously some of those responses are delayed. And so my assistant, Greg, right now I called him right before I got on with you, and you're just checking through. He's like, what else do you need to do? He goes, I'm just going through emails. And he went through 250 emails this morning. So that was just from last week. Yeah. So just to give you an idea, and I mentioned this because when you ask the question, how do you get in touch with us? It's not as simple as just sending an email. You have to be, we've got to see you. We've got to get to know you. And there's a big volume. So you got to move from one of our piles to another pile. And you do that through genuine connection with us and us being able to, come out to see you play and see you at a camp, of course, and then just stay after it. And I think it's a really, we love it. This is not a complaint at all. Like the fact that we have this surplus, because it is absolutely awesome. It's
first world problem, right? Like
totally. Yeah. So I mean, it's but it is something that we have to work through. So knowing our recruits, knowing that that's part of the dynamic is an important thing, and just that, not to bombard us every week with an email, but if you don't hear back, because we do respond to nearly every email. But if you aren't getting the information you need and so on, just stay in touch with us and keep trying to figure it out, and come to a camp and, let us see you in person.
Yeah. Are your ID camps, do you consider those really important?
They are. I think, for us, I mean, there are, like I mentioned, we do a satellite camp in California, which is just my staff. We do a couple different models throughout the year. The model during the school year is just Hopkins staff. So we've done a couple of those, a fall and a winter one. And then the summer one, we'll bring in some other schools, some other high academic minded schools, and just to give bigger access to some of these kids as they're investing in these camps. But no, they're essential on both sides. I mean, for us, our players are always there. And so the connection that our players have with them, from the aspect that a recruit's looking at Hopkins, do they connect with that? But also, the reciprocal part of that, which is this the kind of person that I want to have as a teammate? I mean, we're very thorough with that. And I've tweaked a bit of the way we do camps. I've extended the time we have with them a little compared to what I used to do. So usually our camps are at least 2 days. And so we can add a bit more training in there, because that just connects us to them a little bit more. We've previously, I had shorter training sessions and didn't get into kind of the philosophy of our play and those kind of things. And now we do that differently. So I think the camps get a chance for them to really see, that the coaches are like, this is how we train. And we try not to make it a smoke and mirrors kind of thing. Like, this is who we are, and this is what we do, and this is the environment you're going to be in. And especially camps that are on campus. As I mentioned, we have student athletes from all over the country, and so some of them get very, very interested in Hopkins without ever seeing Hopkins.
Mm-hmm.
And some have a very most, I will say, have a skewed view of what Hopkins will feel like when they get here, because we are in Baltimore. We are touted as a city school, which we are, but when you're in the heart of our campus, it is very different feeling. And so for them to be able to experience that alone is very important, because someone from California that's narrowing this thing down comes to visit, it makes a big difference, to the point where we did the California camp last year. We had a recruit. We had a committed player on one team, and her teammate came to that camp, and we got to know her a little bit. We really liked her. She came to our camp, and we did a campus tour with one of our players. And from walking on campus, walking through campus, and seeing what it was, she almost immediately said, "This is where I want to go." And it wasn't like that prior to that. She was very interested in Hopkins, but the environment and the school and the people she met immediately shifted that in her, to the point where she was expecting to go to an Ivy League school camp the next week, and she canceled. So I think for sure they're very, very important.
Well, so what I'll do is I basically cull through your website, and whatever links and information, your camps, I post down below in the description, and then and if there's anything you want me to post out there, I'll gladly do so. And yeah, so Coach, I really do appreciate you taking the time today. It's really, really great talking to you. I'm hoping over the next months, and definitely in the fall, I'm gonna dive into the women's game a lot more. This is, I'm all stumbling through this and how I stumbled into this in this past fall. And so it's really, really do appreciate you taking the time.
I do too. I think you're doing a great service to our division. I reflected on, before talking to you now, I reflected, because last week was a selection show for men's and women's basketball, and during the selection show they have someone from D3 Hoops talk about the teams and all those kind of things, which we currently don't have, which I'd love to have, by the way. So if you know anyone that's that invested in some of that, but just having someone and or a group like the D3 soccer guys and gals that really love our division and really love kind of profiling and showcasing these athletes. I mean, and every school is a little bit different, and I think that's the beauty of it. And I would say there's probably more differences across our division than any other. And so finding a voice within our D3 landscape is so important. And no, I love talking about my team. I love talking about my journey, because my whole career has been in D3. I really found that that's my home. So I think the more exposure that you can give and other people can give, the better. So I appreciate just the time and the effort that you're putting forward too.
Thanks. I really do appreciate it. And yes, I totally agree. D3 across schools is so much different. Each school is so different and brings so many different aspects to education, to athletics, you name it, that than any other division that I've been able to tell. So
for sure,
I'll keep doing this. You gave me a reason to do another interview. So
good.
We're gonna. I'm gonna ping you just before the season, and maybe we could touch base for a little bit just to get your insights, and then.
And I can answer the question, a couple of them, a little more clearly. I see the team and see what we have, and then we can hit it. No, I'd love to. This was great. Yeah.
All right, Coach. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon.
Right on. See you later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bye-bye.